In today's episode, we are talking about 2025 tax due dates. Now, why is this important? Let me tell you. Filing tax returns late brings about the failure to file penalty, right? And we know for individuals from previous episodes that filing your individual tax return, the 1040 late, can cap out at a failure to file penalty of 25%. What does that mean in layman's terms? That means if you have a $10,000 tax balance, you freak out, you go into hiding, you're like, I could never pay this $10,000. What am I going to do? You finally get the courage 5 months later to face it. You file that tax return late. Not only are you going to be looking at the $10,000, now we have an additional $2,500 added to that. So now your tax bill that was $10,000 went up automatically to $12,500. And that's without us including the failure to pay penalty as well.
Welcome to the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast. Are you behind on taxes? Is the IRS threatening you or your business? Are you overwhelmed and confused about how to resolve your tax issues? Let's join Timalyn as she explains your options and how she may be able to help. Timalyn Bowens is America's favorite EA.
Hey family, welcome to episode 51 of the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast. Listen, it's been almost a full calendar year since we've been together on this platform. And I have to admit, I miss you all. No, seriously, I really miss you all. But after 2 years straight of delivering a valuable episode to you all every other Friday, hitting that 50th episode, I knew within myself that I had to take a break if I wanted to continue to offer valuable information that you could rely on. So that's why the last episode was March of 2023, but guess what? I'm back, I'm back, I'm back, and I hope you've missed me too. To kick this, I don't want to say new season, but to kick the podcast back off, I want to make sure that we're covering a topic that's going to encompass all taxpayers. Because yes, while this is the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast, you all that have been faithful listeners know that I'm not just here to help people who are in tax trouble. I'm here to help those who want to avoid tax trouble with the IRS, right? Because my personal mission is still to fill the tax literacy gap one taxpayer at a time. So, in today's episode, we are talking about 2025 tax due dates. Now, why is this important? Let me tell you. Filing tax returns late brings about the failure to file penalty, right? And we know for individuals from previous episodes that filing your individual tax return, the 1040 late, can cap out at a failure to file penalty of 25%. What does that mean in layman's terms? That means if you have a $10,000 tax balance, you freak out, you go into hiding, you're like, I could never pay this $10,000. What am I going to do? You finally get the courage 5 months later to face it. You file that tax return late. Not only are you going to be looking at the $10,000, now we have an additional $2,500 added to that. So now your tax bill that was $10,000 went up automatically to $12,500. And that's without us including the failure to pay penalty as well. All right. So this tax season that we're in right now, even if you see that you do have a balance, you want to make sure that you still file that return on time, even if you can't pay the balance with the tax return, because we know that you do have other options. I broke that down in episode 10, where I talked about installment agreements. Now, I'm not going to get into that today, but you do have options there. So we want to make sure that you do file. Now, also keep in mind that if you file an extension, that's going to give you an additional 6 months to file, which can help you avoid that failure to file penalty. But if you have a balance due still, you are still going to be penalized with a failure to pay penalty. All right. Now, before I get all the way into October talking about extension season, let's talk about the right here and right now. If you are an employer today, the relaunch of the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast, January 31st, you have a tax deadline today. This is when your 1099s need to be issued to contractors and make their way to the IRS. It is also the day that your W-2s need to be out to employers, and that W-3 reconciling all the W-2 as well as copies of the W-2s need to also make their way to the IRS. Now, here on the podcast, we focus on federal requirements, obligations, penalties, and tax. But keep in mind that if you live in a state that collects income tax, that W-2 is going to also be due to them. If your employee is working somewhere where the city requires income tax, you have to keep that in mind as well. Okay? Now, in addition to the W-2s and the 1099s getting out, postmarked no later than today, right, to avoid the penalty, you also have your last quarter of 2024 employer quarterly federal tax return due. This is the 941. This shows all of the wages that you paid out last quarter in addition to all the taxes that you had withheld. Listen, if you've been skimming off the top and taking some of the taxes that you've been withholding, please check out the episode where I talk about the trust fund recovery. Try to get that paid in ASAP. I know life happens and there are arrangements that can be made there so the IRS doesn't come and close your business. But even if you don't have that payment in full, you still want to make sure that you get it filed on time, okay? This is not the time to duck and cover or throw something on the wall and pray it sticks, all right? We want to make sure that we are getting all of our tax obligations filed on time. Now, for my individuals, we're back to you. By February 15th, you need to make sure that you resubmitted your W-4s for exemptions from withholding. Now, let me tell you this. If you make more than the standard deduction, sweetheart, you should not be filing exempt. Okay? Unless you got a whole lot of babies, they're going to cancel out your tax liability. For most people, they should not be exempt because sometimes we get a tax liability confused with a tax refund. And just because you get a tax refund doesn't mean that you didn't owe anything. That just means that you had money withheld from your job that took care of the tax liability, and or you have children or other dependents who, I don't want to say they're only worth $2,000, but in terms of taxes, maybe worth $2,000. So each child under the age of 17 is going to be the equivalent of $2,000 towards your liability. So let's say you have 5 children and you had a tax liability of 8,000. With that, your W-4 that you fill out for your employer, they may not end up withholding anything, but that's because you have your 4 children listed on the W-4, right? So this says, hey, we're projecting what their tax liability is going to be based off what we know they get paid, and they have 4 children on here. They're good to go. That does not mean you didn't have a tax liability. It just means that you had tax credits to eat that up. All right. Now, if the W-4 is confusing for you, or if you're retired and you do the W-4P, please go to my YouTube channel, because I think it was the second full week of January, I released the updated 2025 W-4 series. So go check that out if you need a little bit of direction in filling out your forms. Now, At the end of February, businesses that file paper 1096s and 1099s, those are due then. Y'all, please don't be that person. That is the deadline, but please e-file those things. Get them out today. Okay, that's neither here nor there. Next, we have in March the individual tax return estimated payments for farmers and fishermen. Okay? That is when the final estimated payment for 2024 is. Because with farmers and fishermen, things are seasonal and due to nature, their income can vary even more than the average self-employed person. So the IRS does take that into account and gives them a later payment date. Okay? Now, with the 17th, we have the partnership and S Corp return deadline. So please note, if you own an S Corp or partnership, your filing deadline is not April 15th. It is March 17th. Why? Because a K-1 is going to be issued from that return that needs to be put on your 1040. Here's another thing. If this is your first year having an S Corp or partnership and you're like, why is my person making me extend? I don't want to extend. I never extend. It is because they don't want to rush adding your K-1 in and potentially make a mistake. Okay, so let them extend. We don't want any unnecessary mistakes. Let's get everything right the first go round. Now, in April, of course, we have the big tax deadline that everybody knows. The individual 1040s are due on April 15th, not 14th, not 16th, the 15th. Now, of course, knock on wood, fingers crossed, pray to Jesus. We don't have any natural disasters, nothing is going to push that date out, no COVID relapse, right? For all intents and purposes, as of right now, April 15th is the deadline. If you are required to file Form 114, the F bar, it is also due this day. All right. If you're making any IRA or HSA, so your health savings account or individual retirement arrangement, if you were making any last minute contributions for the 2024 tax year, those are also due on April 15th. Okay. Because you may be looking at your tax return with your tax preparer, trying to figure out how you can bring that liability down a little bit. A last minute contribution to your HSA for the 2024 tax year can take that down. Okay. So the IRS does allow you to have until April 15th to make that contribution. As if we don't have enough going on, also April 15th, C corporations are due. The first quarter 2025 employers' quarterly federal tax returns are due. And to add salt to the wound, if you are self-employed or an investor, April 15th is also the due date of your first quarterly estimated tax payment for the 2025 year. All right. So you may have to go back and listen to this part again because that's a lot of stuff on April 15th. But then we get a little grace period, right? Now, if you're working with a nonprofit and they're on a calendar year, May 15th is going to be their tax deadline. All right. Then we go to June 16th, kind of a quiet month. June 16th is when the second quarter 2025 estimated tax payment is made for individuals and corporations. Now, if you don't know what estimated taxes are, I will link below the episode where I talked about estimated tax payments. And please make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel because probably in March, I will be doing a video covering how to figure your 2025 estimated tax payments, okay? Moving along, July 31st, we have the second quarter 2025 employers' quarterly federal tax return. Again, that's going to be the 941. Also on this day, applicable self-insured health plans report and pay annual fee on the second quarter. This is filed on Form 720. That may be above some of your heads. However, I wanted to make sure that I'm covering everybody here. Okay? Then we get another quiet month. August is quiet. Moving along to September, we have the 15th. Okay, I don't know if you guys recognize the theme or not yet, but on the 15th, we've skipped 3 months. The third quarter 2025 estimated tax payments for individuals and corporations is due also on September 15th. The S Corporation and Partnership 2024 calendar year tax return extension deadline. So, back in March, if you filed an extension, you only get 6 months to file. And then if you miss that deadline, failure to file penalties start accruing. Okay. So it's really important that when you file an extension, you get it in by the extension deadline. Next, October, we're kind of busy again. That's going to be the 2024 FinCEN Form 114, the FBAR extension deadline. It's also going to be the 2024 individual extension deadline. Okay, same for corporations. And here we go again with the third quarter 2025 employer's quarterly federal tax return due, but that's on the 31st. Okay. So payroll's typically going to be on the 31st, unless that falls on a weekend, which for the IRS, the weekend is Saturday and Sunday. If that's the case, or it falls on a holiday, then it will go to the next business day, okay? We get a quiet month in November. But note, if you miss the extension deadline, you still need to work with a preparer. You don't have to wait till next spring. The e-file system for the IRS does not shut down until November, so they are still accepting e-filed returns. But here's the thing. There are some fly-by-night tax preparers, so you may not be able to find one that can actually file the return. However, there are reputable, my goodness, I've been gone so long I can't talk. There are reputable people who are around all year long. Now, I got 2 episodes on how to choose your tax preparer. You can go check those out. But of course, since you've listened to this episode, you're not going to miss the tax deadline. But I just wanted to let you know the system doesn't usually shut down until the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Okay? Now let's wrap this bad boy up. In December, we have December 15th. It's the fourth quarter, 2025 estimated tax payment for corporations. December 31st is the deduction deadline for 2025, with the exception of some things, because there's always an exception, right? So like I said earlier, you can contribute to your IRA for the tax year all the way up to April 15th. So when I say deduction deadline for 2025, that's why it's important for you to work with somebody who's knowledgeable in tax laws and tax planning. So if you miss the tax deduction deadline, they can inform you of some things that you can still contribute to get a deduction all the way up till April 15th. All right. Now, those are our deadlines for 2025. I said a mouthful today. I'll have these in the show notes for you, though, because you're that special to me. If you have any questions, make sure that you send those over to me at americasfavoriteea.com. You all, I missed you so much. It is most definitely my pleasure to be back with you. If you found this episode informative, make sure that you share it and help me on my personal mission to fill the tax literacy gap one taxpayer at a time. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen today. I'd like to thank Jim Ray Consulting Services for helping me get this message out to you. I hope you found the information helpful. Did you know 1 in 50 people have a tax problem? Please share this episode with your friends and family because you never know who may need help. Again, thanks for listening. Hey, just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It provides a framework and possible solutions for solving your tax problems, but it is not legally binding. Please consult your tax professional regarding your specific tax situation.